Hello, good morning, everybody. It is Sunday morning, and I'm enjoying a cup of coffee from my Vice Armory mug. If you have any ammunition needs at this point, Vice Armory, that's where we need to go. ViceArmory.com. Folks, I want to get into something that I think is not talked about enough. Maybe it's a side note to this pandemic, or maybe it's exactly an end game. I talked yesterday about coincidence. So, and this is a lot of this comes out from a couple of different publications that I receive. But Dave Godigan is quoted here, or I'm referencing him, and he talks about the bazookas that our federal bank, or our central bank, right? Our central bank is the Fed. The bazookas that they pulled out to try to make this economic collapse from the pandemic endurable. Well, as he points out, the Fed's already out of bullets. The $2.6 trillion is not enough. Jerome Powell is on record as saying we're going to need to do more. So I subscribe to a theory that if they ask for something, the government, they always take much more. It's never what they say it's going to be. Monetary policy is basically done. Fiscal policy is going to be called upon to do the heavy lifting now. And how exactly does all of that work? I think negative interest rates and the death of cash is what the global elites want. I talked about this with my brother, who is a business owner, and when it comes to business, arguably much smarter than I am. But I can remember when I mentioned to him that negative interest rates are coming. Negative interest rates. And I want you to really think about that. Deutsche Bank has already stated that if you have 100,000 euros, basically $109,500 in the bank, they're going to charge you 0.5% to keep it there annually. And from Germany to Japan, negative interest rates have been an ongoing way of life for some time. At 1%, at 2%, that means for every $100,000 you have in the bank on deposit, it's going to cost you $2,000 a year at a negative 2% interest rate to maintain that deposit. You think, well, that's not going to affect me. Maybe that's what you think. But according to Mr. Powell, low rates will be of little help until the virus is under control. This is an underlying theme that we continue to hear. What I want all of us to try to get our mind around, do some research, start engaging in real critical thinking. Why are they telling us what they're telling us? The experts, the experts. Again, this is the convergence of large, complex, dynamic systems coming together, whether it's health, financial, education. So let's think about this. Vaccinations. Mass and mandatory vaccinations for a coronavirus, a novel coronavirus, that we've allowed, we being people, humanity, and governments controlling elite systems, allowed a virus to transmit across this globe in record amount of time. Again, going back to China, did not let any travel from Wuhan, the province, go out to any place in the country, in China, but was allowing all travel in and out of Wuhan to the rest of the world. And now we're going to need a vaccination in order to stop this. Social Security was going to be insolvent by 2035. Now, after just less than 2 months of economic slowdown and shutdown, it looks like Social Security has now shaved 2 years off of that estimate. And we don't even know exactly by the end of this year how close to the insolvency of Social Security we're going to be. The euro dollar, the globe's desire for the United States dollar to be used for all exchanges has been eroding at a more rapid pace. This negative interest rates that I talked about earlier. Global climate change is being used as the explanation. That's the reason why this is all happening. The United Nations and the Small Arms Treaty, the ability to be able to eliminate any gun, like you see in Canada, any gun that's not a bolt action single shot. And I said it. It's right in plain sight. I've said it on 3 different occasions, and it's probably more. But on 3 different occasions, I watched President Obama say, I think everybody is, it's a no-brainer. I think everybody is in agreement. We need common sense gun laws, that automatic and semi-automatic weapons need to go away. It's the little automatic weapons, most people are in agreement with. The semi-automatic part has slipped in, and the press never gave pushback on it. Less than 10% of the people that are even listening even acknowledge that it had been done. If we look at this convergence of these large dynamic systems, our education system is crumbling, which may or may not be a bad thing. But what is increasing at such a rapid pace is this police surveillance state. When they're talking about the tracking and the tracing of who's had the virus and who hasn't. Again, a virus that children, seem to not be affected at all by it. They supposedly they have some protein. We have some protein in our lungs at an earlier age that really doesn't even allow it to transmit to others. That's what the science is actually saying. What's the narrative going to be? What's the quote unquote, they tell us what the science is later. And it doesn't even look like that children can even pass this along to the elderly. I think we've been just lied to on so many different levels about this, and I think it's going to continue. Think about the taxes that are not being collected right now. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. Well, I think we're about to see much higher taxes at the local and the state level. And then eventually it's going to be at the federal level, because you have to collect taxes to make up for all this money that you're printing. This is the start of a horrible, horrible cycle that we're about to go. And we've let this happen. I want to share with you a couple of different excerpts from. So there was a meme that was going around a few weeks ago. You probably saw it. It's 3 circles, and in the middle circle, it's me. And that is, I'm concerned about the impending economic devastation. I'm concerned about the virus, and I think we're overblown at the same time. All of those things, the circles that interchange, but create one circle in the middle, and that's me. I'm a little bit about all of these things. And he quotes about that meme. He says, I'm still in this camp, by the way. I go out a little bit, I'm masking up when I do, ditto for my wife, who quickly spun up an extensive protocol for disinfecting packages and groceries and whatnot. And after the initial shock in mid-March wore off, his publication, The Five, was quick to mock the experts who didn't see a pandemic coming, but instantly pivoted to a shut it down yesterday stance. But with another few weeks hindsight, guess what? The experts who did see it coming, including one we cited way back in mid-February, are starting to look more and more like cranks. Their dire even if we lock down projections, have not come to pass. And folks are discovering their track record isn't so hot. Turns out the fellow we cited in mid-February once anticipated as many as 200 million deaths worldwide from a 2005 bird flu outbreak. The actual total was 440. So here we are now, with control freaks and power trippers citing silence to justify the most absurd and arbitrary measures. When they and their kind were saying in mid-March the world has changed forever and we're never going back, you could almost sense a certain glee. No? I think, Dave, I want to read it because sometimes I cannot paraphrase as eloquently as some of these people write. But he sums it up pretty well, I think. Didn't it seem like, especially in mainstream media, so many people were so happy that finally we get to talk about climate change and a Green New Deal and the elimination of air travel and all of these things are going to happen. And with almost this sense of excitement about it all. That should be scary. Another publication that I subscribe to talks about the interconnectedness and talks about asking the question, did we really do the right thing? And this is in regards to something here in Michigan. And the article goes and says, every business puts a roof over someone's head and food on his table. They're all essential and they're all interconnected. And I want to stop and say, when this first came down and we were standing around by the campfire and we talked about essential businesses and non-essential businesses. And I said, my business is essential. It's essential to me. Now, whether or not I'll be able to continue to function based on my interconnectivity with other businesses, that's yet to be seen. But I'm going to keep working. And the reality became the interconnectivity. I don't have a lot of work to do because everybody else is shutting down. Essential, non-essential. Fear of going out without even wearing a mask. Side note, I was in a local Meijer yesterday. I was appreciating others who choose not to wear a mask. The vast majority of people in that Meijer are wearing a mask. For those of us who are not wearing a mask, or as the woman wanted to make sure she told me under her mask that I was going the wrong way down the one-way aisle, I said, yes, you're right, I am. I'm a nonconformist. These are not small things when they try to tell us it's a one-way in a grocery aisle. And then 2 aisles later, we'd already made eye contact. There were a couple of different gentlemen in there that, we're showing appreciation for each other. It's okay if we don't wear a mask. It is okay. And a woman, an older woman, was giving this gentleman a very hard time about not wearing a mask. And I appreciate his response, and that was, just move on. Just move on. Thank you. Have a nice day. Just move on. Which prompted me to express that you can't arbitrarily create a law and a penalty without it going through the legislation. And we need to be supportive of each other. Not trying to shame somebody just because you buy into something and I'm not going to. You want to criticize me being a nonconformist? You hope that I come to the rescue when that rail car is loading you into it for some re-education that the government, and you think, oh, that's crazy. That's out there. I think we have some things coming and we need to wake up. But back to the interconnectivity. Just look at the restaurant industry, he says. Restaurant owner Alan Van Dyke's recent opinion letter in the journal titled Bad Government is Killing Small Businesses emphasized the interconnectedness of all businesses. Van Dyke and his 3 children own 2 brew pubs in Grand Rapids, Michigan, with 59 full and part-time employees before COVID-19. They spent $120,000 a month on payroll and another $130,000 a month on vendors. The Michigan state government ordered them to shut down on March 16th. Again, let me just say, President Trump and the administration never shut down any of the state's businesses in any state. It was up to the governors to eliminate and make it, according to their executive order, essential or non-essential, legal or illegal to continue to operate. There are states in our country that never shut down anything. And I'll use Oklahoma and South Dakota as two of them that I know right offhand, and I've seen a lot of interviews with their governors, and I appreciate those governors' approach to this. Back to the article. They kept takeout and delivery open until they were ordered to shut down that too. They had to throw thousands of dollars of perishable inventory into the trash. And that is heartbreaking. Heartbreaking food waste. Now, with zero revenue, they're still on the hook for $50,000 per month in rent, utilities, and other fixed expenses. Van Dyke noted the chain reaction impact on their employees, vendors, landlord, and lenders, and as he concluded, quote, "The old nursery rhyme says that for want of a nail, a shoe was lost. For want of a shoe, a horse was lost, and so on until a kingdom was lost. Let's not lose the nail," end quote. An economy is interconnected web of nails, shoes, horses, and much more. The essentialness of all of those businesses is a law of nature. You cannot break that law, but you can break yourself and everyone around you if you try to violate it. We're doing that right now, inflicting untold pain on hundreds of millions of people worldwide. And we're talking about this because it's supposed to protect the most vulnerable among us. And yet, the most vulnerable among us, the elderly, those with underlying comorbidities, die every single year. And we never once decided to do this because of on a medical basis or purpose or reason. Because it just doesn't make any sense. You're going to kill many millions more. The cure is going to be worse than the actual virus. And we've known this for a long time. But for some reason, right now, we've decided to throw out everything we know to be true. And more people are going to pay. The most vulnerable among us are dying at a more rapid rate right now than they were 3 months ago. Opioid addictions, overdoses are up. Alcohol-related deaths are up. Suicides are up. Our mental health issue has gotten so much worse. I only have it from somebody who works at St. Mary's Hospital that is in Grand Rapids. And this is their words. And I'd like it if somebody can confirm this, but he's a student through one of the colleges out there and had got laid off because there just wasn't enough work in the hospital. Was brought back because there was a little bit of a switch around with who's reporting to what ward. So he got a chance to go in and work with some COVID-19 patients. They had a floor dedicated to the COVID-19 patients. They had actually more floors dedicated, but they weren't coming in. The top floor of this hospital, eight floors, was the floor dedicated to the mental health issues. He comes back to work, works a little bit in the COVID area, and then he goes up on the top floor. And within a couple of week period during all of this, and I'm looking for confirmation on this, but what the story is from somebody who works in that hospital was, you have multiple floors in that hospital now dedicated to our mental health issues, not COVID-19. And I'm wondering, if that's the case, isn't it possible that this is going on a lot more in a lot more places? I want to read with you one more thing before we wrap up. And that is, this is from the 1940s. And it's a classic statement about interconnectedness of all businesses. And the article talks about Leonard E. Read, Mr. Read's must-read essay, I Pencil. And for many of you who are my age or have studied these types of things, this is so important and it's so timeless. And he founded the Libertarian Economic think tank Foundation for Economic Education in the 1940s. He wrote dozens of books and numerous essays, but this essay is one of his best-known works. Writing from the viewpoint of the pencil, Mr. Read shows that no single human being knows how to make a pencil. You might think it's a ridiculous statement until Mr. Read lays out all of the various operations required to make one. For example, he starts his description of the pencil's innumerable antecedents with the wood needed to produce the pencil. Quote, my family tree begins with one, in fact, is a tree, a cedar, straight grain that grows in Northern California and Oregon. Now contemplate all the saws and trucks and rope and the countless other gear used in harvesting and carting the cedar logs to the railroad siding. Think of all the persons and the numberless skills that went into the fabrication, the mining of ore, the making of steel and its refinement into saws, axes, motors, the growing of hemp and bringing it through all the stages to heavy and strong rope, the logging camps with their beds and mess halls, and the cookery and the raising of all the foods. Why? Untold thousands of persons had a hand in every cup of coffee the loggers drink. And then it continues in similar fashion to every step of the production process until Mr. Read points out, quote, if you can become aware of the miraculousness which I, the pencil, symbolize, you can help save the freedom mankind is so unhappily losing. Now, given the coronavirus lockdowns, we'd have to change that last bid to read, the freedom mankind is unhappily lost and desperately needs to regain before it's too late. Remember, Mr. Read was writing this in the 40s as a result of all of the liberties that were lost to the FDR administration. And Mr. Read provides some insight as to how we could all be okay with government shutting everything down. Quote, once government has had a monopoly of a creative activity such, for instance, as the delivery of the mails, most individuals will believe that the mail could not be efficiently delivered by men acting freely, end quote. That's why people think only government can build roads, even though that's clearly not true. Likewise, lots of people mistakenly believe that only a government-mandated shutdown could properly address the threat of the coronavirus. I know because I made the mistake as I wrote the March article of Extreme Value. So this gentleman writes where he was on the publication stating only a full government shutdown can help out everything. And yet the truth to that is actually, the opposite is actually true. Societal chaos will result from not allowing people to choose their own actions based on their own levels of risk tolerance. And we see that in Lansing on Thursday. And I'm not necessarily saying that everybody was right or everybody was wrong in any of that. But I have been saying that there is so close to the surface an anarchy, a sense of anarchy, a sense of we need to destroy the government that we allowed this powerful. There's a greater sense of that so close to the surface than I've ever seen before. It might look like rigidly mandated order from the government, but in fact, it's a system for breeding chaos, including the real potential for widespread violence, and in turn, that would inspire even more heavily handed government response, making the situation even worse. Back to Mr. Read. He finishes his essay with a lesson. Leave all creative energies uninhibited. Merely organize society to act in harmony with this lesson. Have faith that free men and women will respond. I, Mr. Pencil, seemingly simple though I am, offer the miracle of my creation as testimony that this is a practical faith, as practical as the sun, the rain, the cedar tree, and the good earth. End quote. Our reliance on big government doesn't make us strong. It makes us weak and exposes us to large systemic risks. The more centralized a given system is, the more vulnerable it is to extreme tail events. And by that I'm talking about the extreme events deemed unlikely by standard probability analysis, but which are in fact much more likely based on historical precedent. We have to continue to look back. How do these things actually play out to understand what they're going to do to us next. We need less faith that only government can fix certain problems and more faith in the ability of free men and women to organize themselves voluntarily in search of creative solutions to problems. In the final analysis, government-mandated lockdowns are merely exaggerated versions of the horrible damage that governments do every day by prohibiting voluntary interactions. The coronavirus lockdowns are different in only in degree, not in kind, from normal government policy throughout the so-called developed world. It's as if the government suddenly started waging wars on eating, drinking, exercising, shopping, worshiping, and live entertainment by closing restaurants, bars, gyms, malls, churches, synagogues, sports, and concert venues. It's identical to the government's insane wars on drugs, guns, and cash that oppress mostly poor people every single day. That's not life. That's the opposite of life. It's a path to societal death, too clearly resembling the paths of so many heavy-handed failed empires of the past. We have done this. We, the people, have allowed the elected and appointed to change our world forever. Do we admit when we're wrong? Remember, it happens slowly at first, and then all of a sudden. I appreciate you. I really do. I thank you for your time. I thank you for being a subscriber. I thank you for sharing it with somebody else. Until we get together again, I'm James Detroit, and I'm out.